3 nights ago in Jerusalem, at the close of the 18th Israel trip I've had the honor of crafting and leading as a rabbi, I asked our 42 temple travelers to share what struck them most about the 9-day immersion we had with the land and people of Israel. As happens on every Israel trip, deep friendships are formed among the participants, including temple members who've been a part of this congregation for 30 years but met for the first time on this trip. We covered every region of the country, all 7 different topographies, in a nation so small it can fit into Lake Michigan. We went from the Negev in the south, where we find Abraham in this week's Torah portion, to a gourmet evening in the northern home of a legendary Israeli family who lives 6 miles from Syria and Lebanon and whose Jewish roots in Israel's earliest Jewish settlement date back to 1882. There are 2 Israels: the heavenly Israel we conjure up in our heads in our prayers, the Israel we close our Passover Seders with next year in Jerusalem. This heavenly Israel manifests itself in images of heroic kibbutz workers and seemingly clear-cut answers for Israel's defense forces. Even Jerusalem, known as Ir Shalom in Hebrew, the city of peace, has heavenly connotations. But it's complicated, because while there's a heavenly Israel, there is the earthly Israel, the reality less experienced by tourists and pilgrims, the Israel that leaves you with more questions than answers, questions grounded in love and respect for a society built on top of 39 layers of Jewish history. This synagogue's connection to the modern state of Israel is more than a matter of members and friends traveling there on trips. Hardwig Perry's, the honorary president of this temple from 1934 to 1948, and for whom a BBYO chapter is named, actually had a forest named for him in Israel for helping create the Jewish state. The more recent visual connection is linked to the beautiful flowers on the bima tonight and on every Shabbat. The weekly pulpit flowers you see are the 65th wedding anniversary present Mimi Kopald and Temple's 25th president S.L. Kopald gave to one another so that they could be reminded of their love for Judaism and for each other every Shabbat. Kopi went from being president of this temple in 1961 to chairing the Board of Governors of the Hebrew Union College and dedicating its Israel campus on King David Street 4 years before the Six-Day War. Another past president, Rudy Scheidt, also flew to Jerusalem in 1963 for the dedication in his position as national vice president of what is now the Union for Reform Judaism. Rudy and Kopi dedicated the earthly campus everyone passes by next to the King David Hotel. They did that over 56 years ago. The current president of the state of Israel, Reuven Rivlin, noted the notion of the earthly Israel in his powerful analysis of Israeli society entitled The 4 Tribes of Israel Today. Tribal schisms are tearing Israel apart, he said, and the Jewish state's future hinges on a course of action for coexistence among the 4 tribes within Israel today. The 4 tribes and approximate population percentages are as follows. 10% of Israelis are ultra-Orthodox. 12% are modern Orthodox or national religious. The 3rd tribe are the Arab citizens of Israel, who comprise, get this, 21% of Israel. The remaining 57% are secular, meaning non-Orthodox, which includes a growing indigenous Israel reform movement for which Temple is viewed as a mentor among a handful of American synagogues. Whether we like it or not, President Rivlin said, the makeup of the stakeholders of Israeli society and of the state of Israel is changing before our eyes. Not only do these 4 tribes not meet each other or talk to each other, they are educated toward a totally different outlook regarding the basic values and desired character of the state of Israel, which leads President of Israel Rivlin to ask, will Israel be a secular state, both Jewish and democratic, or will it be a state based on religious law? Will Israel be a state of all its citizens and of all its national ethnic groups? Since entering office, President Rivlin has sought to be a voice of unity and moderation, often calling for better integration for Israel's Arab population and decrying racism and bigotry, including religious discrimination against the Reform movement, which just ordained this week its 107th Israeli Reform rabbi on that same campus dedicated by 2 Memphians named Copald and Scheit. Israel's president continues to warn that if little is done to end the tension, fear, and hostility among Israel's 4 tribes, Israel will not be able to continue functioning in its current form. From an economic standpoint, the current reality is not viable. The mathematics is simple. Any child can see it. The severe and painful epidemic of poverty, which is already having a major effect in Israel, will only expand and worsen no matter how much we American Jews give financially from the outside. From a political standpoint, Israeli politics has become an intertribal zero-sum game. One tribe, Arab Israelis, feel excluded from the game. The other 3 fight over government budgets for education and housing on behalf of their own tribe and nobody else. In the past, the Israel Defense Forces served as a central tool for fashioning the Israeli character, because in the military, Israeli society confronts itself and shapes itself morally, socially, and in many ways economically. However, in the reality of the earthly Jerusalem today, more than half of the population of Israel does not even serve in the military. So how can each of these 4 tribes cultivate a sense of security toward the other and assume a shared responsibility for the fate of our homeland? How can equality and equity be fostered among the 4 tribes in Israel who are in Israel to stay? How do you bridge ultra-Orthodox and secular Jews, or modern Orthodox and Arabs? How can Israel avoid sectarianism? How can Israel turn around the current separation among the 4 tribes? The answer is a 5th tribe of Jews, both inside and outside the land, calling for collaboration, respect, and understanding. A 5th tribe willing to defend basic human, religious, and civil rights. Whether the defendant is an 8-year-old Orthodox girl who was spit upon for not dressing modestly enough in the eyes of an ultra-Orthodox rabbi, or whether it's Israel's Reform Religious Action Center defending, get this, the basic rights of a humiliated Arab teenage girl recently pulled off a public bus by the police and interrogated and debased because she was texting her mother in Arabic. The Jewish girl behind her from another tribe texted her family to call the police because she said there was a terrorist on the bus writing in Arabic. This fifth tribe is also needed to speak up for our own sister congregation in Israel, a Reform community led by a brilliant female Reform rabbi whose congregation has been waiting 6 years simply for permission to build a permanent place for Israeli Reform Jews to pray and reach the nearly 80% of that city who are not Orthodox. 0 synagogues like ours where men and women can sit together exist in this small city of Shoham, where the 20% who are Orthodox, get this, just dedicated their 19th small synagogue last week at the same time 3 different Memphis groups were visiting. Our temple trip acted as the fifth tribe last Saturday in Shoham on Shabbat, filling a temporary space as I co-led a moving and meaningful service with Israeli Reform Rabbi Rinat Safania, and as these Memphians from Temple I didn't expect to see tonight, and the Israeli Reform Jews of Shoham united and mixed instantly like family, not superficially. And where did we go the next day and the day after? To the other tribes, to Ethiopian, Russian, and Argentinian elderly immigrants, both religious and secular, at Lifeline for the Old, and to the school of our Israel educator Yishai Shavit's children, Yad B'Yad, where 700 Jewish and Israeli Arab children attend school together and fulfill President Rivlin's dream of making Israel viable for generations to come. We, the fifth tribe of American Jewry, gave strength to Anat Hoffman of the Israel Movement's Religious Action Center, and she's the reason we were able to have services a week ago at the Western Wall with men and women together praying out loud for Memphis family members and friends who are ill and reciting the names of loved ones who recently died. It takes the fifth tribe outside Israel to help make it happen inside Israel. It takes Jews like us in the diaspora who understand that the image of God means that we must all be treated equally, not only for the citizens of Memphis, but for every group and tribe in the mosaic of the Jewish state and its society. Temple, the Reform movement, and our Jewish values of inclusivity and equality are certainly part of the answer to the infighting among the 4 segregated tribes within Israel and attempts to delegitimize the other. This is certainly, my friends, no time for the Reform movement to check out, disconnect, or disengage. It is now more important than ever for diaspora Jews like us to raise the flags of diversity, tolerance, and equality, because for Israel to survive as a Jewish state, she must remain a state for all Jews. and we are at the forefront of leading that possibility. It was actually the president of Israel himself who added diaspora Jewry to his tribal mosaic as the fifth tribe. And who better to fight sectarianism, separation, and injustice than a religious movement in Judaism like ours, grounded in justice, equality, and inclusivity, not as a talking point, but as a core, uncompromising Jewish principle. And who better within our movement than a Southern congregation like ours? Everyone talks about Southern hospitality and how good we Southerners are in welcoming others into our homes. This is the week in the Torah, my friends, when we learn that it's Jews in Israel who were the original experts in hospitality and welcoming, specifically Abraham and Sarah outside Beersheba. Welcoming strangers was important where our people began in the desert, and it is critically important now. Whether in Memphis or Israel, our movement strives to be truly open to everyone, people with disabilities, people of different races, LGBTQ people. We Reform accept all Jews as Jews, Orthodox, conservative, secular. We welcome intermarried families, newcomers, guests, all welcome under Abraham's inclusive tent. Whether in Israel or Shoham, we have the choice and the power to become tools of either fragmentation or instruments of reconciliation. We can humiliate or honor others. We can hurt, be silent, or heal and speak up. We can and must provide a sense of security for all Israelis and all Jews, a sense of equity and equality and shared responsibility. This week's Vayera portion, which means "and God appears," opens with hospitality and it ends with the story you all know, the harrowing binding of Isaac. It was called off just in time to demonstrate that God does not want children to be killed in God's name. Before Abraham attempts to follow through with the sacrifice of his son, what does the Torah say? Vayelchu shnehem yachdav. And the two of them walked together as one. That phrase reappears on the graves of married couples buried in our temple cemetery. It hopefully expresses the direction, and the two walked as one. The fifth tribe outside the land of Israel is walking with the four tribes inside Israeli society that President Rivlin was brave enough to underscore. At our emotional farewell dinner 3 nights ago, I asked each participant to share what touched his or her Jewish core most. One seasoned traveler said, and I quote, "Wherever we travel around the world, my wife and I look for Jewish places. Whether we're on vacation in Dubrovnik, traveling to Havana, or in Venice, where there were armed guards at the synagogue and we couldn't even get in. Wherever we travel," he said, "we look for Jewish places. But here in Israel," he said with emotion, "we didn't have to look because Judaism is everywhere." Back home in the Mid-South, many people know me, one leader said. But here in Israel, everyone gets me. "I love my Christian friends," said one, "but I don't know how I'm going to answer the questions they'll be asking." Questions like, how was Israel? Did you go to the Old City and the Western Wall? Did you go to Masada? Our temple traveler said, and I quote, "I think I'll just answer yes or just say it was great, because few can understand that it wasn't the tourist places everyone should definitely visit. that touched me to the core. It was the human connection I made with members of our sister congregation in Shoham. It was the Jewish and Arab school children in the integrated public school we spoke to. It was the elderly man making beautiful Judaic crafts with 300 other seniors at Lifeline for the Old that touched me. And it wasn't the separated side of the wall, the postcard side of the Western Wall. It was our private Shabbat service on the other side. Most don't even know. What Israel needs most that we can offer as American Jews in general and Reform Jews in particular is the equality, tolerance, and acceptance and experience shared. The 50 Israeli Reform Jewish communities seek our guidance and mentoring, and as we found singing and ending Shabbat with our sister congregation in Shoham, when we offer our presence, our relevant expression of singing and meaning of religious Judaism to the Israelis craving it, you find yourself receiving far more than you're giving. In closing, that is how we make this week's Torah portion, Vayera, and God appeared, live today. That's how we make God appear, just as God appeared to Abraham in a different way, in a different time, and in a different place near Beersheba nearly 4,000 years ago. When we speak of our synagogue being a force for good for the entire Jewish world, our relationship with Israel is yet another facet that gives our collective existence meaning as Jews. It is through the values of our people and faith family, grounded in goodness, love, wisdom, and compassion. And finally, my friends, helping the President of Israel, Reuven Rivlin, build an Israel grounded in all of the above, so that we may become a light unto the nations, and that God appears and lives. And let us say, Amen.